The widower's doorstep. The war paint looked fresh. The woman's belly didn't. Dust devils spun across Samuel Hartwell's porch as 200 Cheyenne warriors sat their horses in perfect silence. The morning sun catching the steel of trade rifles and the glint of bone breastplates. The pregnant woman slumped forward on a spotted pony, her white dress torn and stained with trail dust, hands bound with rawhide. Through the next few minutes, you'll discover why a man who'd spoken to no one but his horse for 12 years suddenly became the most important person in 3 territories. And by the end, you'll understand how a woman's desperate lie changed the course of the Indian Wars. Chief Black Kettle raised his lance, eagle feathers stirring in the prairie wind. "White man, you take squaw. We go." Samuel stepped from his cabin doorway, Winchester loose in his hands. His coffee still steamed on the porch rail. The bacon still sizzled in the pan behind him. Everything normal, except for the small army that had materialized like smoke at dawn. "I don't take nothing from nobody." The chief's eyes never left Samuel's face. "Woman says she your wife. Says baby is yours." The words hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. Samuel studied the woman. Pale skin burned red by sun, blonde hair matted with sweat, maybe 19 years old. He'd never seen her before in his life. "Chief, I've been alone on this spread for 12 years. Haven't had a woman here since my Sarah died of the fever." But even as he spoke, Samuel saw something in the woman's eyes. Not madness, not fever, but calculation. She was playing a game with stakes he didn't understand yet. Black Kettle's stallion pawed the earth. Woman ran from soldiers at Fort Lyon, said terrible things about bluecoats, said she carry your child. He paused, letting the weight settle. "We bring her home." Samuel's blood went cold. Fort Lyon, where Colonel Chivington had been gathering volunteers for what he called Indian hunting expeditions. Where rumors flew of a coming campaign that would make the Sand Creek Massacre look like a Sunday picnic. The woman lifted her head then, and Samuel saw desperation carved deep in her features. "Please," she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. "They'll kill me if you don't." A hawk cried overhead. The horses stamped and snorted. 200 warriors waited. Samuel Hartwell had built his life on simple truths. Work hard, mind your own business, trust your gut. But standing there with the morning light painting everything gold and deadly, he realized some truths were more complicated than others. "What's your name, miss?" "Mary. Mary Saunders." Her voice cracked like dry leather. "I told them I was Mary Hartwell." The lie hung in the air like gun smoke. Samuel felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes measuring his every breath, every muscle twitch. In Cheyenne culture, to harbor a liar was to become one. To reject a pregnant woman was to invite the wrath of spirits. But to accept her story would make him complicit in whatever she was running from. "Chief," Samuel said slowly, "this woman might be carrying a child, but it ain't mine. Haven't been to town in 6 months. Haven't seen another white face in twice that long." Black Kettle studied him for a long moment. Behind him, a younger warrior, painted for war, scalps hanging from his lance, spoke rapidly in Cheyenne. The chief raised a hand for silence. "My son says we should take your scalp and leave woman for coyotes. Says all whites lie when death comes calling." Samuel felt sweat pool between his shoulder blades despite the morning chill. "Your son's got every right to feel that way. But I'm telling you straight, this woman's troubles ain't mine." "Then whose troubles are they?" The question hung in the air like a rattlesnake's warning. Samuel looked at Mary Saunders again. Really looked this time. Her dress had been fine once, store-bought from back east. Her hands showed calluses, but not the deep grooves of farm work. And there, barely visible beneath the grime on her wrist, was a thin band of pale skin where a bracelet had been. "Miss Saunders," Samuel said quietly, "why don't you tell us what you're really running from?" Mary's eyes darted between Samuel and Black Kettle, then settled on something far beyond the horizon. "I was at Fort Lyon, working in the sutler's store. Colonel Chivington, he had plans. Terrible plans." She paused, her breath coming in short gasps. "There's going to be another massacre. Bigger than Sand Creek. He's got 600 volunteers, artillery, even some cavalry from Denver. They're planning to hit the reservation at dawn on Sunday." Black Kettle's stallion shied as the chief's grip tightened on the reins. Sunday was 3 days away. "Woman speaks truth," said the painted warrior, his English heavily accented. "Our scouts report blue coats gathering, many guns, many horses." Samuel felt the pieces clicking together like shells in a revolver. "So you ran. But why tell them you were my wife?" Mary's laugh held no humor. "Because you're the only white man in 50 miles who trades fair with the tribes. Because Black Kettle's people trust you. Because—" She paused, pressing a hand to her swollen belly. "Because I knew they wouldn't kill a pregnant woman carrying a white man's child. Not if that man had shown them respect." The morning wind picked up, sending tumbleweeds spinning across the yard. Samuel's mind raced through the implications. If Chivington was planning another massacre, every minute counted. But harboring a fugitive from the army would make Samuel an enemy of the territorial government. "Chief, if what she says is true—" "It is true." Black Kettle's voice carried the weight of accumulated grief. "Too many of my people died at Sand Creek because we trusted white man's promises. This time, we prepare for war." The painted warrior urged his horse forward. "Father, we waste time with talk. Let coyotes have the lying woman. We ride to warn the people." But Black Kettle held up his hand again. "Samuel Hartwell has never lied to us. His word is his bond. If he says this woman is not his wife, then she is not his wife. But—" The chief's eyes glittered. "If he takes her under his protection anyway, if he chooses to shelter her, then she becomes part of his family, his responsibility." Samuel understood the choice being offered. Reject Mary Saunders, and she'd be left to face whatever justice the warriors deemed fit. Accept her, and he'd be pledging his honor, maybe his life, to protect her. "What kind of proof do you have?" Samuel asked Mary. "About Chivington's plans?" From inside her torn dress, she produced a folded paper, edges yellowed with sweat and travel. "Supply requisitions, dated for next week, extra ammunition, hardtack for 600 men, medical supplies for anticipated casualties." Samuel examined the document. The letterhead was official. Department of the Missouri, Colonel John Chivington commanding. The supplies listed were enough to outfit a small army for extended campaign. This could have been stolen from any military post. "Look at the signature." Samuel squinted at the bottom of the page. There, in purple ink, was a name that made his blood run cold. Captain Silas Dunn. Samuel knew that signature, had seen it on bogus land deeds that had cost 3 families their homesteads. Dunn was Chivington's right hand, a man who'd sell his own mother for promotion money. But there was something else. Stamped in the corner of the requisition was a seal Samuel recognized. The Territorial Governor's Office. This wasn't just a military operation. It had political backing from Denver. "Miss Saunders," Samuel said carefully, "how'd you come by this paper?" Mary's cheeks flushed red. "Captain Dunn, he took liberties. When I fought him off, I grabbed what I could and ran. I knew if they caught me." She didn't need to finish. Samuel had heard enough stories about what happened to women who crossed Army officers. The sun climbed higher, and the warriors grew restless. Horses stamped and snorted. Rifle butts creaked against saddle leather. In the distance, a meadowlark sang its liquid song, oblivious to the tension crackling through the morning air. "Chief," Samuel said finally, "I'll take the woman. Give her shelter until the baby comes. But not as my wife. As someone under my protection." Black Kettle nodded slowly. "You understand what this means? If soldiers come looking for her, they'll have to go through me first." The words surprised Samuel, even as he spoke them. 12 years of solitude had taught him to value peace above all else. But looking at Mary Saunders, frightened, pregnant, clutching evidence of another planned atrocity, he realized some things mattered more than a quiet life. The painted warrior spoke rapidly in Cheyenne, gesturing toward Mary with obvious contempt. Black Kettle listened, then shook his head. "My son says white women bring nothing but trouble. But I remember your Sarah. She was a good woman, kind to our children when they came trading." The chief's voice softened. "Perhaps this one can learn same kindness." Samuel felt a familiar pang at the mention of his wife. Sarah had indeed been kind to everyone who crossed their threshold. White, Indian, Mexican, didn't matter. She'd always said a person's character showed in how they treated strangers. "I'll do my best to teach her, Chief." Black Kettle wheeled his stallion toward the horizon, where dust clouds already marked the warriors' retreat to their reservation. 3 days, he called over his shoulder. "If what woman says is true, much blood will flow. We will remember who warned us." As the war party disappeared into the shimmering distance, Samuel helped Mary down from the spotted pony. She moved awkwardly, one hand pressed to her back, the other cradling her belly. "How far along?" Samuel asked. 7 months, maybe 8. Hard to tell exactly. She paused at the cabin door, studying his face. "Why did you do it? Take me in, I mean." "You don't know me from Adam?" Samuel considered the question while he stirred the forgotten bacon back to life. "My Sarah always said a man's character shows in how he treats folks who can't do nothing for him. You're about as helpless as they come right now." Mary settled into the kitchen chair, the same chair where Sarah used to sit while Samuel cooked breakfast, back when conversation and laughter filled the cabin instead of 12 years of silence. "I can work," Mary said quickly. "I'm not looking for charity. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I've got skills. Right now, you got one job, keeping that baby healthy." Samuel set a plate of bacon and beans before her. "We'll worry about the rest later." As Mary ate with desperate hunger, Samuel found himself studying her more carefully. Beneath the trail dirt and exhaustion, she carried herself with a dignity that spoke of good upbringing. Her speech, when she wasn't frightened, held traces of Eastern education. "Where you from originally?" "Boston. My father was a minister." She paused, a fork full of beans halfway to her mouth. Was being the important word. He disowned me when I started showing. The old story, Samuel thought. Good family, fallen daughter, long journey west seeking redemption, or at least anonymity. Except this particular daughter had stumbled into something bigger than personal shame. Tell me more about what you overheard at Fort Lyon. Mary set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. Colonel Chivington's been recruiting volunteers from all the mining camps, telling them they'll get to keep whatever they can carry away from the reservation. Horses, weapons, even... She shuddered. Even scalps, for bounty money. Samuel felt his jaw clench. After Sand Creek, Congress had launched investigations, held hearings, promised reforms. But apparently nothing had changed in the territories. If anything, the massacre had emboldened men like Chivington. What about the other officers? Anybody speaking out against it? A few. Captain Soule tried to argue that attacking peaceful Indians violated federal law. Chivington told him that in wartime, there were no peaceful Indians. Mary's voice dropped to a whisper. Then he said any officer who wasn't with the program could face court-martial for cowardice. Samuel walked to the window, gazing out at the empty prairie where 200 warriors had sat their horses just minutes before. Somewhere out there, Black Kettle was racing to warn his people. But would warning be enough against 600 heavily armed volunteers? Miss Saunders, that paper you showed me, is that the only proof you have? No. Mary reached into her dress again, producing a small leather journal. Captain Dunn kept detailed records, patrol schedules, supply inventories, even personal notes about which officers could be trusted to follow orders without question. She handed Samuel the journal. As he flipped through the pages, his blood grew colder with each entry. Dunn had documented everything. Meetings with territorial politicians, payments to newspaper editors for favorable coverage, even plans to blame the massacre on Indian aggression to justify further military expansion. But it was the final entry that made Samuel's hands shake. Colonel insists on complete elimination this time. No survivors to contradict our official report. Reservation to be burned, wells poisoned, winter food stores destroyed. Governor assures full territorial support. Operation Prairie Justice commences Sunday dawn. Prairie Justice. Samuel wanted to spit, more like prairie murder. Mary, this journal. It's enough to stop the massacre. Maybe even bring down Chivington. He looked at her intently. But getting it to the right people won't be easy, and it'll put you in more danger than you're already in. Mary stood slowly, one hand braced against the table. Mr. Hartwell, I've been running for 3 days. I've lied to a Cheyenne war chief, thrown myself on the mercy of a stranger, and carried evidence that could get me hanged for treason. She met his eyes steadily. A little more danger doesn't scare me. Samuel found himself impressed by the steel in her voice. Whatever mistakes had brought Mary Saunders to his doorstep, she wasn't lacking in courage. All right then. First thing we do is get word to the territorial marshal in Denver. He's got federal authority, might be able to override Chivington's orders. The marshal's name is William Barrett. He was appointed by President Johnson himself, specifically to investigate military misconduct in the territories. Mary paused. I know, because Captain Dunn was terrified of him. Samuel nodded. Barrett had a reputation as an honest lawman, one of the few federal appointees who couldn't be bought by maining interests or railroad money. But Denver was 2 days' hard ride, and Sunday was only 3 days away. We'll never make it in time, not with you in your condition. Mary's face fell, but only for a moment. Then we send the journal ahead. I know a man in town, telegraph operator. He owes me a favor. Samuel raised an eyebrow. What kind of favor? The kind where I didn't tell his wife about his visits to the saloon girls. Mary's smile held no humor. Men always underestimate what women know. As the afternoon wore on, Samuel found himself revising his opinion of Mary Saunders. She might be young and pregnant and in trouble, but she had a sharp mind and the kind of practical intelligence that could keep a person alive on the frontier. They worked together, preparing for the journey to town. Samuel checking his rifle and gathering supplies. Mary copying key pages from Dunn's journal in case the original was lost. Her handwriting was neat and precise, the product of good schooling. "You know," Samuel said as he oiled his Winchester, "if this works, if we stop the massacre, you'll be a hero. Territory might even give you a reward." Mary shook her head. "All I want is a chance to start over. Somewhere far from here where nobody knows my story." She paused, pen hovering over paper. "What about you? You could have turned me away, stayed out of it. Why didn't you?" Samuel considered the question while he counted cartridges. Why hadn't he? The safe play would have been to let Black Kettle deal with Mary however he saw fit. Samuel could have gone back to his solitary routine, his bacon and beans, his long conversations with no one but his horse. "I guess I got tired of doing nothing while bad things happened to good people." It was the truth, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that Sarah had been gone 12 years, and in all that time, Samuel hadn't felt needed by another human being. Mary Saunders, frightened, pregnant, clutching stolen evidence of planned atrocity, needed him in a way that reminded him who he used to be. The sun was setting by the time they finished preparations. Samuel had saddled his horse and loaded supplies for the journey to town. Mary had completed her copying work and sealed both the original journal and the copies in oiled cloth. "We'll leave at first light," Samuel decided. "Get to town by noon. Send the telegraph message to Marshal Barrett in Denver. With luck, he'll get federal troops to Fort Lyon by Saturday night." Mary nodded, but her face was pale with exhaustion. The long day had taken its toll, and Samuel could see she was fighting to stay upright. "You need rest. Take my bed. I'll sleep on the floor." "I couldn't. This is your home." "Miss Saunders, you're carrying a child and running for your life. I think we can bend propriety a little." As Mary settled into the cabin's single bedroom, Samuel built up the fire and settled into his chair with a cup of coffee. Outside, coyotes sang to the rising moon. The familiar sounds should have been comforting, but tonight they seemed ominous, as if the very prairie was holding its breath for what was coming. Samuel dozed fitfully in his chair, dreaming of Sarah, of Black Kettle's painted warriors, of 200 rifles pointed at his chest. He woke to the sound of Mary crying out in her sleep, calling for someone named Thomas, the baby's father, most likely. As dawn broke over the eastern rim of the world, Samuel rose stiffly from his chair and began preparing breakfast. They had a long ride ahead and events that might change the course of history. But as he stirred the coffee pot, Samuel heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. Not the rhythmic drumming of Indian ponies this time, but the heavy thudding of shod cavalry horses. A lot of them. Samuel grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. Dust clouds on the horizon marked the approach of perhaps 20 riders, blue uniforms visible even at a distance. The army had come calling. "Mary?" Samuel called quietly. "We got company." She appeared in the doorway, dressed but obviously frightened. "Is it them?" "Looks like cavalry. Stay inside and keep quiet." But even as Samuel spoke, he knew hiding would be pointless. If these were Chivington's men, they'd come specifically for Mary Saunders. The only question was whether they planned to take her back alive. The cavalry patrol reined up in Samuel's yard, horses lathered with sweat and foam. At their head rode a lean officer with captain's bars and cold blue eyes, the kind of man who'd order a massacre and sleep sound afterward. "You Samuel Hartwell?" "I am." "Captain Morrison, Fort Lyon. We're looking for a fugitive from military justice. White woman, pregnant, possibly armed and dangerous." Morrison's eyes swept the cabin. "She was seen in this area yesterday." Samuel kept his rifle barrel pointed at the ground, but his finger rested on the trigger. "Haven't seen any fugitives, Captain. But then, I don't get much company out here." Morrison dismounted, his hand resting on his saber hilt. "Mind if we search your cabin? Just to be thorough." "Matter of fact, I do mind. This is private property, and you don't have a warrant." "Don't need one in time of war." Morrison smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Territorial governor has declared martial law in all frontier areas. We have broad discretionary powers." Samuel felt his jaw clench. "Since when are we at war with pregnant women?" "Since they start stealing military secrets and consorting with hostiles." Morrison stepped closer. "This woman is a spy, Hartwell. She's carrying information that could cost American lives. You wouldn't want to be an accomplice to treason, would you?" Before Samuel could answer, Mary stepped onto the porch. Her chin was raised defiantly, but Samuel could see her hands shaking. "I'm here, Captain. No need to threaten this man." Morrison's smile widened. "Miss Saunders, you've led us quite a chase." He gestured to his men. "Sergeant, place this woman under arrest for theft of military property and espionage." "Now wait just a minute," Samuel said, raising his rifle. "You got proof of these charges?" "All the proof I need." Morrison produced a wanted poster from his jacket. $500 reward for information leading to her capture, dead or alive. Samuel studied the poster. Mary's face looked back at him, younger and cleaner, but unmistakably her. But something about the poster bothered him. The paper was too new, the ink too fresh. This had been printed recently, probably after Mary had already fled Fort Lyon. "Captain, this poster's dated yesterday. How'd you know to make it unless you already knew she was missing?" Morrison's confident smile faltered slightly. "Military efficiency, Hartwell. We move fast when national security is threatened." But Samuel's frontier instincts were screaming warnings. Something about this whole scene felt wrong. 20 cavalry troopers for one pregnant woman? A dead or alive bounty? And Morrison himself. Why would a captain personally lead a fugitive recovery mission? "Miss Saunders," Samuel said carefully, "you recognize this officer?" Mary studied Morrison's face, then shook her head. "I've never seen him before. Captain Dunn was the one who tried to assault me. This isn't him." Morrison's hand moved to his pistol. "Enough talk. Sergeant, arrest them both. They're obviously conspiring against the United States Army." But the sergeant, a grizzled veteran with Irish accent and skeptical eyes, didn't move. "Begging your pardon, Captain, but what's the specific charge against the civilian? He's on his own property, hasn't threatened anyone." "The charge is harboring a fugitive. Now follow your orders, Sergeant." Samuel saw opportunity in the sergeant's hesitation. "Sergeant, what's your name?" "Patrick O'Malley, sir. 23 years in the Army." Sergeant O'Malley in 23 years. Have you ever seen a captain personally chase down one pregnant woman with a full cavalry patrol? O'Malley's weathered face creased with thought. Can't say that I have, sir. Morrison's face flushed red. Sergeant, I gave you a direct order. Aye, Captain. But I'm wondering about jurisdiction. This is civilian territory, not a military reservation. Don't we need proper warrants for arrest? Samuel felt a surge of hope. The Irish sergeant was thinking like a soldier, not a hired gun. Sergeant, Mary said suddenly, ask your captain why he knows about the journal if I only stole it 3 days ago. Ask him how a wanted poster got printed so fast. Morrison drew his pistol. That's enough. Both of you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit treason. Resist, and I'll shoot you where you stand. But Mary reached into her dress and produced Captain Dunn's journal. Sergeant O'Malley, this book contains evidence of a planned massacre. 300 innocent Indians are going to die on Sunday unless someone stops it. She tossed the journal to O'Malley, who caught it reflexively. Page 47, Sergeant. Read what it says about Operation Prairie Justice. O'Malley flipped to the indicated page, his eyes growing wide as he read. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, he whispered. Captain, this says Colonel Chivington plans to kill everyone on the reservation. Women, children, even the babies. Morrison lunged for the journal, but Samuel stepped between them, rifle raised. Easy, Captain. Let the sergeant finish reading. O'Malley continued scanning the pages, his face growing grimmer with each entry. Captain Morrison, sir. This journal names you specifically. Says you're part of the planning committee for the massacre. The morning air grew electric with tension. Samuel could see Morrison calculating odds, weighing options. 20 troopers against 1 man with a rifle and a pregnant woman. Should have been easy odds. Except now the troopers were looking at their captain with suspicion instead of loyalty. Sergeant, Morrison said through gritted teeth, that journal is fabricated evidence. The woman is a known Confederate sympathizer trying to discredit the Union Army. But O'Malley was still reading. Says here you got paid $300 from territorial funds to keep the operation secret. Says you recruited volunteers from mining camps with promises of Indian scalp bounties. The sergeant looked up, disgust clear in his weathered face. Captain, I fought at Gettysburg and Antietam. This ain't war, it's butchery. Samuel saw his moment. Sergeant, I'll make you a deal. Help us get this evidence to Marshal Barrett in Denver, and I'll throw in $100 from my savings. That's more than your captain's paying you for murder. Morrison raised his pistol toward Samuel. I won't warn you again, Hartwell. Drop the rifle. But the click of 20 rifle hammers being pulled back stopped him cold. Samuel looked around in amazement. Every trooper in the patrol had their weapons trained on Morrison instead of him. Captain, Sergeant O'Malley said quietly, I suggest you holster that weapon. These boys don't much like the idea of massacring Indians for bounty money. Morrison's face went through several shades of rage before settling on pale resignation. He slowly holstered his pistol, but his eyes promised future vengeance. This isn't over, Hartwell. There are forces at work here bigger than one Irish sergeant and his conscience. Samuel kept his rifle steady. Maybe so. But today, conscience seems to be winning. O'Malley mounted his horse and gestured for his men to do likewise. We'll be escorting you folks to Denver, if that's agreeable. Make sure this evidence gets to the proper authorities. As the enlarged party prepared to ride out, Samuel helped Mary onto his horse, then climbed up behind her. She leaned back against his chest, and for a moment he remembered what it felt like to have someone depend on him. "Samuel," she said quietly, "when this is over, when the baby comes, I want to name him Thomas Samuel, after his father and the man who saved us both." Samuel felt something in his chest that had been frozen for 12 years begin to thaw. "That's a fine name, Mary. A name to be proud of." The ride to Denver took 2 days of hard travel, but Marshal Barrett acted swiftly once he read Captain Dunn's journal. Federal troops were dispatched to Fort Lyon with orders to arrest Colonel Chivington and cancel Operation Prairie Justice. The massacre was prevented, the reservation protected, and several territorial officials found themselves facing federal charges. Mary Saunders gave birth to a healthy son 6 weeks later in Samuel's cabin, attended by Sarah's old friend Dr. McCready and 3 Cheyenne women who had come to pay their respects. The baby was indeed named Thomas Samuel, and Black Kettle himself came to bless the child with both Christian and Cheyenne names. Samuel never asked Mary to stay permanently. Didn't need to. She found ways to make herself indispensable around the homestead, and he found ways to make her feel welcome. By spring, the question wasn't whether she would leave, but whether Samuel would ever let her go. On the anniversary of the day she'd first appeared on his doorstep, Samuel carved a new sign for his gate. Instead of just Hartwell Ranch, it now read Hartwell Family Ranch. Mary cried when she saw it, and young Thomas, now walking and talking, clapped his hands with delight. The bachelor homestead had become a family home, and Samuel Hartwell had learned that sometimes the best things in life arrive when you least expect them, carried by strangers who need exactly what you have to give. As the sun set that evening, Samuel stood on his porch watching Mary teach Thomas to throw stones at a bucket, the same bucket that had once held his solitary coffee. The sounds of laughter and gentle argument filled the air where silence had reigned for 12 years. In the distance, smoke from Black Kettle's village painted lazy spirals against the evening sky. The reservation was safe. The threat had passed, and life had returned to its natural rhythms of work and family and hope. Samuel smiled as Thomas's stone finally found its mark, the boy's whoop of joy going across the prairie. Some changes, he reflected, were worth waiting for, even if they arrived on the backs of painted horses, carried by 200 warriors and one desperate woman with nothing left to lose. Don't forget to subscribe and consider giving a like to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.